feel like I have the best of both worlds because I still enjoy Canada a lot throughout the year, and I live here. So yeah, that's where I grew up. I went to school in Kingston, Ontario. I did a 4-year, my 4-year undergrad there. And then while I was completing my undergrad, I had a friend that had worked on a cruise ship in the summers. And I was like, that's interesting. And my family had never cruised. I'd never been on a cruise. I didn't really understand it, but it just sounded really interesting. And I had just come back from my year abroad and I was craving like just more travel and more international. And I didn't really know what that meant. But then when somebody told me about working on board a cruise ship, it piqued my interest. And so it turned out that the woman that recruited for cruise line positions, for onboard cruise line positions, she lived literally within walking distance of my parents' house. The woman that recruited for all over Canada. It was crazy, the coincidence. So I reached out to her going into my 4th year, and I had just run a summer camp as my summer job for international students. So I ran this camp. It was a private school that converted into a summer camp for students from like Mexico and Middle East and Europe. And kids would come, and I would run this camp for 3 weeks on, and then another batch of kids for another 3 weeks. So I had experience with children, is the point. And so one of the positions with youth was youth staff. So I was like, I ran a camp. I can work with the kids on the cruise lines. That's something I can do. So they hired me. Celebrity Cruise Lines hired me as a seasonal youth staff on the Horizon. And I stepped foot on there for their Christmas, New Year's cruise. And because that's when the peak of children come on. And so they tend to cruise lines will hire seasonal youth staff to help with that influx of families traveling. So that was my first entree into the industry.
Wow, I had no idea. Yeah. That is a really cool story. What was it? So you went from, I guess, living in Canada, but then I have always wanted to ask cruise staff this, and I think I've had in the past, but like, what is it like to live and work on a cruise ship? How long were you there for?
I worked consecutively on board for 2.5 years. I mean, I had maybe like a year or two, like a week or two off for vacation, or sometimes I would have a month off and I would go home and then I would get another contract. I did that for 2.5 years, but then for another 7 years after that, I worked for the onboard company, for the onboard revenue company. I worked for the art auction company, and I would travel around. So I didn't work on the ships, but I managed the programs on the ships. And so I would go, sometimes I would have to fill in, and, an auctioneer was leaving, but the new auctioneer couldn't come in time. So I'd have to like quickly get on a plane and like fill in for like 2 weeks somewhere with no notice. This would happen often. Or I would go and sail with the auctioneer and help them and train them. So I still very much was a part of that crew experience over the next other 7 years. But for the first 2, I was like assigned a room. I was living on board. I had a crew number. I had life drill duties. Yeah, I lived on board.
So how was that like? What was it? Just
I know,
seems
it's a
like
loaded
such a
question. It's like, where do you even go with that, right?
I know, but it seems like such a commitment to make that. I've been on cruise ships. I've been on sort of a bunch of inaugurals over the past, since I've been with TMR. So I understand the experience, but I do not understand the experience of crew members. What was the best thing about maybe we should start there. What was the best thing about being able to work on a cruise ship?
Well, for me, the time of my life, the phase of the life that I was in, I highly recommend, if you're going to work on cruise ships, to do it in your early 20s when you don't have you don't have a mortgage, you don't have a car, you don't have financial commitments, and you can just literally travel all over the world. And you work really hard as a crew member, and you never have a day off. You have hours, chunks of time sometimes within the day off, like segments of the day. But then when you do have that time off as a crew member and you've just been working like really hard and crazy hours, all of a sudden you're in Athens, or you're in Buenos Aires, or you're in Cayman, or you're in Juneau, or you're just in this amazing place that you would never have been able to go to, or I thought I would never have been able to go to when I was at that stage in my life. And it was amazing. And so the the slogan of the so cliche, but it's very true, that work hard, play hard.
Yeah.
That's a crew member.
What is
Big
the
time.
community? What is the community like with crew members on board? Is
Mhm.
it a big sort of? Does it feel like a college dorm, or does it feel like strictly something completely different?
I think there's definitely elements of college dorm life
Yeah.
for sure. I wouldn't say that that's the overall vibe. I think every cruise line's culture is different. Every cruise line, even within the ships, the culture can vary. But I think fundamentally it's a transient culture because people are constantly signing on and off for different positions and from different places of the world and at different points in their contract. So there's this unspoken camaraderie
Yeah.
because you build rapport. Like there's like this running, I don't know if you want to call it a joke, but it's like this running thing, I guess, that you just know that if you're in a relationship on a cruise ship and it's like a week, it's basically like 6 months on land.
Okay.
Everything is accelerated, amplified when you're a crew member because things just happen really quickly, because it's very transient. You just learn to build rapport and be more vulnerable and just actually create deep relationships with people in very short amounts of time. And I'm actually, some of the friendships and the relationships that I built while working on board, I still have. In fact, this summer, I'm staying with friends that also met on board cruise ships that I worked with at my Park West days, still when I was on board. They live out in Colorado, and I'm going to be staying, my kids and I, and my husband and I and kids are going to go out there for the summer for 2 weeks in July. And that's from my cruise ship days. I'm still in touch with a lot of people from that stage of my life.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine because you read sort of forums and stuff pop up on the internet about living on a cruise ship because it does seem like
It's hard.
yeah, but it does seem like an attractive thing for someone who's
For
maybe
the
in
right
the
person.
exactly, yeah.
You have to have the right mindset. If you're very particular and you need certain foods and you need your room a certain way. I mean, my rooms were small.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have windows. It was very difficult and sometimes noisy. But again, at that stage in my life, having just been in a college dorm where I lived with like 5 other girls in a very small townhouse off campus, I was it wasn't so uncommon for me. It was an easy transition. I think it's harder for people who have their lives already in a rhythm on land to then transition onto cruise ships is not as easy, but it's so much fun, and crew life can be very rewarding and a lot of fun. And like I said, the cruise lines have dedicated team members and employees that their whole job is and their teams are to take care of the crew members and like activities and mental health. And I can't speak for what it's like now, but probably the hardest part about being a crew member at the time, when I didn't even realize it was that hard, but I think this is what would be the hardest part right now, is the internet and the Wi-Fi and being able to stay connected. I remember back when I was a crew member, I would have to sign up for a time on a computer that was like for everybody. And I would show up at like 10:15 on Friday and log in and check my email and send a message to my parents to let them know that I was not scrubbing the decks and that I was okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I remember my parents took us on a Royal Caribbean sailing when we were younger, and even the internet experience for passengers was significantly different. I remember having to go to the internet cafe, and I think it was you paid per minute, maybe you paid like
yes,
99
that was
cents a
brutal.
minute. Yeah.
With the scratch cards.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, we had that too as crew members. So it was an amazing experience. And oftentimes so I started as a youth counselor, and I very quickly realized that that was not going to be my path.
Okay.
Permanently working on board. And I started I remember interviewing and taking different people out for coffee on the ship on their breaks to talk to different positions on board so that I could get an understanding of where I thought I would fit. And so I ended up landing on the art auctioneering position. So I loved that. That was a really good role for me because I love public speaking. I had my degree in history. And so it was like a really good, and I loved art history. And so it was a good position for me. And so I like to say that between my skills that I honed as an art auctioneer, plus just the skills that you grow as a crew member, I feel like that literally prepared me for anything. I am prepared for anything in life after those being in that situation.
This is Dan McCarthy, and you're listening to the Check-In Podcast.